A mutual friend put me in touch with you guys, and I'm sure everyone here is a drummer and is almost certainly aware of Mark Juliana and his rhythmic greatness. What they may not know is that you were a drum teacher of his. So that is great. Thank you for doing such a lovely job with him.
Thank you.
And yeah, it's a tough thing when you write a book or when you commit to doing it. You obviously have to figure out how to get it into the world or get it out into the world. And I was very conscious of wanting a legitimate, let alone legendary publisher such as you guys to put it out because it's quite an undertaking. And aside from developing the concept and actually getting it all down on paper, the engraving and the editing and the manufacturing process is such an undertaking that I just wanted to be able to pass it off and know it was in good hands. So thank you guys. But when I was talking to my manager and thinking, well, who could I find to even put this thing out? I'm ashamed I hadn't thought about it myself because I have so much of the Hudson Music products and have had them for decades now. But my manager said, why don't you talk to Mark? He put out a book. I'm like, you're right, he did. So he facilitated our meeting, and here we are talking on Zoom all this time later.
Absolutely. Um, so, for people who may not know some of your history before we get into the meat and potatoes of the book,
Mhm.
um, one of the things that's really compelling about the book is that you mirror image, let's say, all the stickings. So you have to apply stickings of different rudiments and so forth, and you have
Mhm.
to do them right-handed, for instance, maybe like this, and then left-handed, right?
Yes,
So that goes to the way you play, which is when you were
correct.
young, you sat down at I guess your dad's drums, and what did you do?
Yeah. So when I first started playing, a lot of those early days would be my dad teaching me something and saying, practice that and come get me in the house when you're done. I had the drums set up in the garage. And at some point, as I discuss in the preface or the intro to the book, I naively realized that my left hand was closer to the hi hat and gave it no second thought after that and just played the beat, whatever it was, like that. And when I called him in to say, okay, I got it, he looked at me slightly bemused because it sounded right, but it looked wrong. And it was that simple. But having learned other things and played them right-handed, I wasn't left-handed, I wasn't right-handed, and some things came to me more naturally right-handed or just as naturally as they did left-handed and vice versa. So there was always this sort of ambidextrous element to my playing. And when I first started, I mean, his kit had two toms up top and two floor toms. The older I got, as happens with many of us drummers, you first want more and more drums and cymbals, and then you start taking them all away. So when I took away, say, the second tom, and I moved the ride right there is where it's, usually is, so to speak. It was so comfortable, and I knew at that point I really had to almost fire from both sides at 100%. So people may notice when I play live or if they see me performing, I'm always on the hi hat left handed and I'm always on the ride cymbal right handed. And certain things I will still lead right handed, even though the left is more comfortable. And that could be from rudiments, books, snare drum stuff. All the sticking always starts right handed. So if I
Mm.
sit down at a pad and I start doing paradiddles to warm up, I do it right handed. So it's a little odd, but as we all discussed initially, now I want to say this. So I wanted to do a book for a long time. And if you guys remember, I gave you a sort of sample chapter and a table of contents of what the book could be. And you and Rob both looked at it and you said, okay, there are at least two, maybe three books worth of stuff in your table of contents. Why don't you just focus on the first four chapters?
Mhm.
And I thought, okay, great. And I had no idea it would inevitably become 184 pages. So you guys were more than correct in that assessment. But when you do a book, you have to really think about what makes it different to another drum book. Why would somebody want this book over another book that talks about rudiments of the drum set? So I suppose the left and right hand leading would be something somewhat unique about the way I approach the drums. So that sort of crystallizes the main point. This could be something for either player or a player who wanted to strengthen his weaker side, which is what everybody strives for, which is why rudiments always go from right to left-handed leading. But this way, you'd be able to approach it, you'd be able to go back and forth without stopping, which I also think is a big thing. It's all about transition and being able to apply. So that just seemed like the best point of the book.
Mhm. It's a great point because, as David Garibaldi has said famously, the book
Uh,
has to have a thesis. You know, you can't write a book. It's like, here's everything I know about drumming. You know, that's my book.
mhm.
um,
Yeah.
so you did that, and I think, if I guess when I'm meeting someone for the first time and working as your editor, I'm trying to get to know your personality as a player, and it quickly became apparent to me that you had a lot of familiarity with the rudiments, like
Mhm.
extreme familiarity. So I figured you must have taken lessons from someone who taught them to you at some point.
I did. So I was self-taught for a couple of years to begin with. And then my first drum teacher was a guy named David Oskinen, who is a lovely guy. And he's the one who first taught me notation and got me started with learning rudiments properly. And from there came the Jim Chapin book, the Buddy Rich modern interpretation of snare drum rudiments,
I
which
got to
is
interrupt you so I don't forget. Did you practice the Chapin book both ways, righty and
I did
lefty?
not. I did
Okay.
not.
How did you
It's
practice it?
I practice it left-handed.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Oh, wait, are
I
you a
did.
lefty? I forgot. Are you a lefty or a righty?
The only thing I do left-handed, things I should say, are hit the hi-hat and right. Everything else, I'm right-handed. It's very strange.
Okay. Okay.
I
Okay.
have no
Sorry. So
real
go.
reason as to why that was. And it's funny, I have my kid's 19 months old now, and when he's doing projects at daycare or whatever, they'll send photos, and I can see in the same day that he'll be trying to do some arts and crafts with the left, and then the other photo he's trying to do it with his right. So maybe I got to get him at the drums sooner than I thought.
That's right.
Yeah,
Anyway, I'm sorry I interrupted. You were saying about your teacher,
yeah. So
rudiments.
so so he got me started, and then the thing that really, again, I use the word crystallize, a sort of epiphany was. Let me backtrack. I would like to. I would assume that most drummers or most musicians when they have to do their rudiments, and I have is the right word because it's not the thing that people usually leap towards. You know, they want to play fast, they want to play hard, they want to learn how to play whatever it is they like listening to. So rudiments and scales and whatever the grammar of your instrument is, you're taught to do it. It's not necessarily the funnest, but thanks to a tape that you guys put out a long time ago. No, I seem to have lost light. Am I too dark here? Or are we okay?
It's okay for now.
All right, I'll do my best here. But you guys put out a classic drum solos video that I just happened to pick up at a Guitar Center a while ago. I mean, when I say a while ago, this is probably 25 years ago now,
This one?
2002. Yes, 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 yes. But on VHS, okay? I'm slightly more old school than that. But I picked that up probably just because I saw drum solos in big bold letters, and I didn't really know what I was getting. But I saw these guys soloing incredibly smoothly, dynamically, and they were playing fast and they were wearing suits. Okay, this is all very controlled, and that made me realize the value of rudiments because I never had any interest in drum corps. Not that I didn't enjoy playing charts on my practice pad at home, but I was never going to join a marching band. I wasn't going to do that at school. But when I realized how it could actually be used at the drum set, that's when I truly began enjoying it. And when you develop these tools and have them in your toolbox, the things you can pull out and string together for fills or solos was always fascinating to me.
Mm. Well, I think if anybody, I'm sure we have a wide variety of listeners here today because I know, Ilan, you posted this. So, one thing I find really great about this is you might be doing the same thing for some of your fans that you
Mm,
just described, right? Because if you're one of the people on the Zoom listening to us, maybe you're a fan of Nine Inch Nails and they've seen you play and they think you're playing really cool stuff. At some point, you always get to this epiphany when you're getting your stuff together on the drums and you're like, oh, I can't play everything as single strokes. I have
mhm,
to eventually incorporate some more sophisticated sticking into my repertoire, right? Um,
absolutely.
and so I was really actually excited to see how familiar and how masterful you were with the rudiments, even playing in some really heavy bands, which
Well,
maybe
thank
some
you.
people don't equate with using
Mhm,
these stickings.
mhm. I mean, look, single strokes are fantastic, and they have done amazing things for everybody. But you do come to realize that when you use even throwing in doubles here and there, you don't have to look at things as, oh, I'm doing a double paradiddle or a flamacue with a double blah 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 blah. You don't need to look at it that way because any way you slice it, rudiments are a variety of two strokes to one, one hand to the other, and alternating them in certain ways. They're all recipes based on that. So when you start incorporating double strokes and you realize how that may set up an accent on the other hand as you come back to it, you realize that rudiments enable you to play faster and more dynamically. Now, everything has its benefits, and as I said somewhere in the book, paradiddles and whatnot are great, but sometimes, especially if you're playing in an energetic band that's up tempo, nothing is going to beat machine gunning single stroke rolls, especially in a live setting. But beyond that, there's so much more to be done, and it's a never ending experiment.
Of course. Well, why don't we there's a few things I wanted to point out that are in the book. Why don't we actually look at it and
Mm,
you can give a little of your insight as to what went into it. So let
sure.
me try to share my screen here. Can you guys see the screen? You see it? Okay, good. Um, so kind of going to go through. And by the way, I want to point out that I'm currently in the Hudson Music web-based digital player. So if you're on the website and you buy the digital edition of the book, you can bring it up on any computer that's hooked up to the internet at hudsonmusic.com. You can also open them up on your iPad if you have the Hudson Music app. And you could take, I have my 100 books now on my iPad that I can take wherever. Ilan recorded audio examples for the book. The cool thing about the digital player is you can just press the icon and the audio will play back. So it is a very user friendly, kind of a system. I pulled anybody wave at me if you teach drum lessons. Ryan, Dylan, yeah, I know you guys do.
Mhm.
Ilya's driving. I don't know if he can wave. You know, yeah, he's waving. He's waving. Okay, keep your hands on the wheel, buddy. All right. So one thing I found out that was interesting is uh, many of my students do not go to the websites to look at the media. And so it's so much faster to learn if you're looking at the media. So the digital player encourages people to look at the media. So,
Mhm.
so Ilan recorded some audio. You can see here in the table of contents that he starts on the pad and goes through these different exercises on the pad. So let's have a look at a little bit of that.
Mhm.
And what was your thinking there, Ilan? What you
Well,
started with here?
I wanted the book to be as sort of relatable and as personable as possible. And what I mean by that is the way I approach things. Before I go on stage, the kinds of warm ups and things that I would do. And I also wanted a sort of linear approach where the book continues to build and expand. So you can't get any simpler than one hand at a time at a practice pad, right? And as that continues, things get a little more complex, they get a little more active and exciting. And then once you've completed the first section, you're all warmed up and you're ready to go and moving on to the drums. So each chapter, each section sets up the next. So you always feel like you're moving upward and onward.
Nice. Can you explain this situation right here? Can you see my pointer with the notation?
Absolutely. The flat flams.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's a great example of, and I'm sure you've come across this as a writer yourself and the millions of books that you've edited. Okay, there are things that we do as players that we don't really know what we're doing until we analyze it. Okay, so when you're in the zone and you're playing, you're doing all this stuff, it's flowing, it's coming naturally, but you don't really know what you're doing. You're in the zone executing. And these flat flams are a thing that I would always do at the practice pad, but I knew they weren't a specific rudiment of any kind. Now, I'm not claiming to have invented this. This is just something that did not have a name. I analyzed what I was actually doing, and then this is what I call them. So, flat flams meaning you're hitting the notes at the same time as opposed to slightly offset or staggered.
Okay.
And taking that sort of one hand at a time approach, you're playing eighth notes on one hand. I mean, let's say you're looking at exercise 6, by the way. Okay, the notes with the stems going upward are played by the right hand, and the notes with the stems going downward are played by the left hand. So when you're looking at it, all the eighth notes with the right hand are just played consistently. You don't even have to think about it, straight 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then the rhythm with the left hand is kind of playing off of that, and it's giving you this fun rhythm to play that you then alternate, and it makes you realize where your deficiencies may be on your weaker side.
So to be specific, a flat flam is like both sticks hit exactly the
At the
same,
same time, yeah,
and you're doing trying to get that, and then you have to
exactly.
switch it, right?
Yeah,
As opposed
yeah,
to as opposed to a regular
yeah.
flam. Yeah.
Because this is a warm-up thing, and this is also a coordination building thing. So I don't want I wouldn't have wanted anyone to be focusing on how tight the flams are or how they sound, because this isn't a flam tap. That's not what it's about. This is about having fun playing a rhythm that actually would translate to the drum set quite well, but you're just focusing on the evenness between the hands. And it looks a little more complex than it is, perhaps, to some readers who haven't seen something like this. But once you kind of ingest the rhythm, they just become very fun rhythms to play.
Hmm. I want to come back to this when we get to the drum set because you discussed the relationship between which I hadn't seen anyone explain a hertas,
Uh,
which for you, those rhythms, um,
uh
where you talk about them as an extension of flams mentally.
Yeah.
You take this complex. We'll get to it. We'll get to it.
I'm glad you
uh,
appreciate this. You write something like this, and I was just wondering. I hope people get what I'm saying, because it's one thing to show and it's one thing to tell. So thank you.
Ilan, this is Hudson music, brother. We eat this for
Yeah.
breakfast.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
good.
yeah, yeah. So and then you get into drags, and
Mhm.
there's some semantics around drags. How do you think of a drag? Like,
I think of a drag as you filling in two notes in the space of one. So that dash mark kind of turning that eighth note into a 16th. Now, I personally view them as tight double notes as opposed to a buzz, right? So that's why I had these drags as sort of being the building block into double stroke rolls, because let's say, I mean, all of these drag exercises, as you can see, are just straight eighth notes all the way across. So you're playing this rhythm, don't even think about it, and then you see when the drags are, you fill in those notes that then excite the exercise. But the point of this is when you see all these sort of different spots you can play them, you then realize how easy it is to use it as an improvisational tool. You can just go for days displacing these drags across single stroke rolls, and you end up with a lot of exciting stuff. At least I find it exciting.
Yep, absolutely. And this is cool. It's drum corps esque, but you have a real make them very usable for the drum set. So for everybody's
Mhm.
clear, I think what Ilan's talking is number one, right?
Yeah.
That's an open double. Right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I did it this way because a lot of people over the years have said, I just can't get my doubles fast enough. I can't do it. And remaining loose is the most important thing when it comes to speed. But if you're doing one double at a time in amidst these drags and single strokes, you realize as you become more comfortable, it becomes easier to string them together. And before you know it, you're doing full blown double stroke rolls
Nice. Very
and
cool.
fast ones and clean ones.
Yeah. Do you have any technical tips for that? I have a few students trying to get, from to
Mhm.
you're trying to explain the feeling of getting them faster.
Yeah. I mean, look, I will air drum for you right now because I have nothing with me. But a way I try to describe it in the book is, and using these drag exercises as an example, you are playing a single stroke roll, okay? Now, you need to realize that when you fit in a drag there and you're hitting two notes, you're fitting in two notes or 2/16 in the space of 1/8 note. And the way you do that is you hit on the way down, but before you come up, right? So you're coming down with your arm, and on the way up, you're hitting off the pad or the snare drum with your wrist. So your arm is doing the motion of a single stroke roll, but it's your wrist that's fitting that second note in between. So see, right now I'm air drumming doubles, and then right now I'm air drumming singles. So it's a matter of getting those second notes in with your wrist or your finger, depending on the speed.
Hmm. That's a good pointer. Can you guys see my screen okay? Rob, you're saying open up my screen? Uh,
I have to say, I also didn't realize that it would be air drumming here, so I'm very sorry about that.
I should have reminded you to have a pad and sticks,
You
Um,
know, I'll
I,
do my best to be
I heard
verbal.
Don Famularo told me a story at one time he went to visit Vinnie Colaiuta
Mhm.
and they were inside, they were catching up, they were in Vinny's kitchen talking, 30 minutes and Vinny's like, playing his left hand the whole time on a pad, 30 minutes in, he abruptly stops and he says to Dom, "Oh my God, I'm such a terrible host. Can I get you a pad and a stick?"
That's funny. That
Um,
is good.
let's Oh, I see. Okay. Rob, let me I want to get to some. So there's the beginning part of the book stays on the pad, does some mixed routines, and then we get
Mhm.
to at the drums, okay? Um,
Yes.
so let's talk about the concept that you're using here, and you apply this sort of
Sure.
framework to I'm going to go to this page right here. So you apply the same kind of framework to all of these different topics now applied to the kit, which is,
Mhm. Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, uh, you play
Uh-huh.
you play a pattern called from the topic
Uh-huh.
of the chapter, which is singles, and
Mhm.
it's a pattern with accents or whatever the sticking is, and then you reverse it so
Mhm.
that it is both right-handed and left-handed.
Correct.
Cool.
Now, what I want to get across here, or what I wanted to get across as I was writing it, so we've now moved to the drums, as you said, and you can tell that, say, exercises 1 through 7 look
Sorry.
almost identical. It is 4/16 notes, quarter, 4/16 quarter. 1E and a 2, 3E and a 4. 1E and a 2, 3E and a 4. But what's changing ever so subtly are where I'm hitting the toms, where I'm integrating them, and where I'm hitting accents. Now, part of this is A, to start simply and slowly get a little more complicated. But what I think more importantly is to give an insight into how creativity works at the drums. Okay. Something very simple can very slowly grow into something more rhythmically interesting, exciting, and inevitably more complex. So you can then see from exercise 8 and on, as opposed to that quarter note, it goes 1E and a 2E, 3E and a 4E, 1E and a 2E. 3E. We're adding a note. Then you can see by 14, 1E and a 2E and 3E and a 4E and the rhythms are slowly expanding. And as you add more notes, then open the possibility for things to be a little more syncopated and just a little more interesting. So it can show you, even if you come up with, and by you, I don't mean you specifically, just figuratively speaking, you can come up with a very simple idea. And just by seeing how these ideas expand, you then get a feel for how you can take a simple idea of your own and just slowly tear it apart and twist it around and turn it into something new. And for those who are uh, fairly decent sight readers, because this stuff is not crazy. It's there's not a lot of rests, if any. Yeah, there's not a lot of rests. It's not very intricate, but you really get a feel if you were to play it straight through as if it were stick control or something. Except I don't demand that anybody plays each line 20 times without stopping. But you
Right.
you then see how things just slowly progress, and by the end of it, you've got something. You end up somewhere completely different than when you started.
For sure. Now, Alon, I just want to make sure. So let's say you're looking at number 11, right?
Yeah.
Right? You
Yep.
you should hit the tom notes loud, right?
Correct. So I do say somewhere in the text of this chapter that feel free to hit the toms as if they're accented. And the reason why I wrote that as opposed to actually putting accents down is because I didn't want to clutter the page with all these markings and articulations. I just didn't think it was worthwhile. But go ahead and play that again. It sounded beautiful.
So I want to point out a couple things here. Check this out. Right?
Mm.
So for those of you guys who haven't, I know some of you are probably seeing this for the first time. Alon did, he put so much thought into this. I think it's so cool. The predictable thing after having seen hundreds of drum books would to just be like have it symmetrically one bar of right, one bar of left, but he has everything starts with the right for one beat and the symmetry happens across the bar line. Can you guys see my pointer?
Mm.
Yeah, see my pointer?
Yes.
So this is right, this is left, this is left, this is right. That makes it harder. It's you don't think it's going to make it harder, but the bar line is here. So good. That's so cool that you did that. And this is only
Thank
the
you.
first page, right? So in addition to all the rudiments, you're being forced to remember where you are in the phrase. And I was going to prepare a lot more of this to demonstrate because I knew you wouldn't be at the drums, but this stuff is hard, man. So like if
Mm.
you guys are watching, right, you're trying to mirror image. Let me switch so I
Mhm.
see some of my guys on the other screen here. So you're trying to mirror image. Like you're trying to make those accents and that thing sound the same both ways,
Mhm.
which Elon does like it's easy, but it ain't
Well,
easy.
eventually, it's to feel that way as well because I don't get into the metaphysics of drumming, and I know a lot of people are crazy about you know posture and balance and philosophy and all this stuff, which I'm not saying is unimportant. It sure is. It's just not something that I think about. But the point being, as you develop a skill and you learn new ones, often you're a little uncomfortable to begin with. But when you feel comfortable and balance, and by balance, I mean quite literally, because it's easy to kind of sink into something. And even right now, if I'm hitting my air floor tom, I'm leaning to the right. But to be able to break that up and then go to my high tom, you have to have that sort of center where you feel comfortable doing both. So I'm glad you appreciated that.
Yeah, it's so cool. And one thing you mentioned before, you said relaxation, how important it is.
Yes.
So I was watching videos of you playing with Nine Inch Nails. By the way, those drum cam videos you made at the shows
Oh,
are sick. If you guys haven't seen
thank you.
his yeah, they're great. So you're obviously playing in a high intensity environment there.
Hmm.
Are your hands totally relaxed when you're doing that?
Yes, they are. Now, it's a strange thing. You could easily do damage if you're just hitting hard for the sake of it and just, gripping the sticks too tightly and just smashing away. And I mean, I also, for example, I use Vader sticks. I use 1A nudes. And the reason why I use nudes is because there's something about my sweat that just makes stick lacquer extra slippery. Okay. And I actually have to grip lacquered sticks tighter because of that slippery sensation. I don't want to let go of the sticks. So the fact that my sticks are raw wood affords me the ability to grip them loosely so I don't have to worry about them flying out of my hands. So, yes. And, we talked about being at the pad as far as warming up before a show. Because I'm a fairly high intensity drummer, especially in something like Nine Inch Nails, I spend more time, stretching and just getting loose as opposed to just focusing on getting my hands ready because it's more of a full body thing and something like that.
Yeah. That's an interesting thing you said about the sticks. Something I go over with, a, or always try to explore with students is your hands sweat a little when you play.
A lot. And
Yes.
I don't even sweat much, but there's something about the sweat in the palms and then the lacquer, it turns into this slippery disaster that I detest.
So I play a stick. This stick has a little bit of a paint and a lacquer feel to it,
Uh-huh.
and interestingly, like my hands don't sweat that much, even if I'm
Hmm.
sweating. So
Uh-huh.
the stick that's nude with no finish on it flies
Hmm.
out of my hands, but in my hand, this lacquer gets tacky. So
Interesting.
yeah, so like I think everyone has to experiment to see.
And I never knew this, and it wasn't until it's probably about 18 years ago or so. I had a lovely Scottish drum tech, and he said, "Hey, how about I just use some sandpaper on your sticks?" And I'm like, "That is a brilliant idea." And I'm not saying that I had anything to do with the development of the Vader nude series, but I asked them to just start sending me the sticks without lacquer, and
Oh,
lo and behold, they thought it was a good enough idea to put out into the marketplace.
nice.
Again, probably had nothing to do with me, but I was definitely an early adopter of that, and it works well for me. But you are right. I have encountered other people who say, "What are you talking about? When I sweat, the sticks get stickier." Like this is
Yeah,
bizarre.
I think it's a totally personal thing.
Hmm.
I want to talk
Perhaps
about
I
this.
sweat acid. I don't know. High
I listen.
pH.
I've been on gigs where I was sweating a ton, either because it was hot or I was nervous. But
Hmm.
like actually, that's how I know I'm nervous if my hands start to sweat.
Got
Otherwise,
it.
um,
Yeah.
I don't want to not get to this flam thing issue that I mentioned before. This thing that you cover. So,
You're the
uh,
boss. You ask me whatever you want.
oh, if you say that, you're asking for trouble, man. So, can you guys see the screen again? All good? Yeah. Okay. Cool. So,
Getting in here.
we're talking about flams now. This is
Huh.
on page 54 of the book. Um, so, Ilan, maybe you could explain. So, if you look at exercise one, there's a flam, and I guess you're using the high tom,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
And then the next thing is a herta in exercise two down here, right?
Uh-huh.
Which is, and you point out that what they're sort of brothers, like.
Yes. And what you are discussing right now is the part that has the sort of red background, this example. And one thing I'd like to say is that I tried to approach the book or the text in the book in a conversational manner, as if I was sitting down and teaching somebody right then and there, which quite frankly is the only semblance of a real job I've ever had. I used to give drum lessons after school at 13, 14 years old. So I'd kind of have to find ways of explaining things. And it was always exciting when I realized a way of explaining something and I saw the light bulb go off in somebody's head where they understood it. So part of the challenge in explaining via text, or in this case, notation as well, uh, we see here that at that top line where it's just straight quarter note flams. Okay, so you have the flat flams where you're hitting at the exact same time as we discussed. Then we move over one bar and we're hitting proper flams. And then when we get over to the third bar, you see that the notes are displaced by a full 16th. Still not a crazy amount of space, but you're just, if we're looking at it this way, this is a flat flam, this is a flam, this is a 16th note displacement, okay?
Yep.
So I don't want to put you on the spot here, but if you can try that, that would be great. You don't have to, but
So one thing that's interesting is if you play a flat flam on one surface,
mhm,
it can choke the drum. Like,
mhm. Yep,
but when you're playing in rock, if you're playing, you're essentially playing flat flams on two surfaces, right? So
exactly.
so when you do the first line and you switch to the flam, okay, check it.
Mhm.
Now you go to the that really choked. Wow.
Yeah,
Then you just go to the flam, right?
yeah,
Do you recommend to do it as a grace note?
yeah.
Or okay, so that adds another layer of
Uh-huh.
thinking you have, right? Because now you switch to the flam. You certainly could play it like,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
And then you
yeah,
eventually
and
get to, or
exactly. So, in fact, do me a favor, do the exact same thing you just did going through those three bars, but instead of all on the snare drum, now do it with either a floor tom or a tom, whatever you're most, and the snare, whatever you're most comfortable with.
okay. If you guys have seen some of my Zoom things for Hudson and Sabian, now you see my MO. I get free lessons out of this. Isn't this awesome?
Yeah.
I love it.
I love your setup, by the way.
Oh yeah, we'll
Very well
talk about
done.
that. So yeah, so I guess you wanted. You can start to separate
Yep.
it, right?
Yes. So, if then when you see the next line down, and I actually apply that in a triplet, in something that actually sounds musical, you can see how that slow separation of the notes becomes a very useful tool. And I would find myself, let's say, improvising a little solo with the drums. I would kind of start doing flams, and then I would split them up more, and they would become more of a Herta. And that's when it kind of clicked that they are closely related.
That's cool. So again, for you guys to see the challenge of this, if you look at like three, so Alon, the little grace note in three, that's on the, so that should be here, right? Right?
Yep,
Okay. So,
correct.
and then
Great.
just getting that sticky, Then when you
Yeah,
go to four,
yeah,
this, you separate your hands and you get a herta.
yeah,
Uh, right?
yep. So
And then
it's
you got,
and it's the identical sticking as the flam. It's just the notes are displaced by a 16th. So
yeah.
it becomes a you get the sticking and the coordination for it, but it takes on a life of its own. And I feel like Hertas are it's almost like the first rock rudiment, because a lot of people do them, they don't know what they're called.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
just a way of speeding up single stroke rolls from time to
You wait,
time.
you mean Hertas? You're talking about Hertas?
Yes.
Yeah. I think that
Yeah.
the name is sort of like become accepted, where people know what that is,
Yeah.
Like when I
Well,
first heard
back
hot
in
for
my
teacher,
day, it was just this thing.
I didn't know what that was.
Yeah.
We didn't know what to call that.
Well, there you go.
Um, so again, going back to that theme of, I realized, I was like, oh my gosh, I got to work on because I'm left-handed, but I play righty. So
Oh, interesting.
when you guys go through this book, um, you'll see his material, Ilan's material really like slaps you in the face with where your balance between your limbs is not comfortable, right? So even if I go back and play that line and that does not, I'm getting better at it because
Mm.
I've been trying to play it, but so really, really challenging stuff to get. And I'm
You
only
know,
playing the easy ones so far.
I struggled with a name for the book for months, and I should have just called it a rudimentary slap in the face, but you didn't give me that
Oh,
idea when we struggled for it. So,
it's like when I'm talking to somebody, I always think of the perfect thing to say, like after I've hung up the
yeah.
phone, same thing.
Yes.
Uh, but anyway, does any of you guys have questions you want to type into the chat? Because we're getting close to our time here. Feel free.
I'm happy to
Now,
answer anything and everything. And thank you to everybody who's joined. I see some faces up here. I hope this is mildly entertaining to you.
yeah, this is great. Oh, Ray Levere is here. Hey, Ray, what's happening, man? One of our esteemed authors, fantastic drummer.
Mm.
Um, so again, I was just showing. Actually, here, let's go ahead. Let me share my screen again. I just want to point out also what you do at the ends of the chapters. Uh, you're starting to put things together. If you zoom in on some of these where they're longer phrases,
Hmm.
uh, and I feel like pretty cool real world type of stuff, like where that you'll, I don't know. I'll just zoom in. Like so, here you have like Hertas within sextuplets here.
Hmm. Yeah, and that was another thing that I wanted to focus on. I mean, as I said earlier, the things start out very simply, and then they evolve into something more complex. And here, as we're sneaking in, I mean, here's some 30-second notes with the Hertas and whatnot. If you were to just kind of open the book and get to that page, you might think, especially if you're not comfortable reading, you might go, "Ooh, this is perhaps a little more than I bargained for." But if you take that journey from the beginning, it is very easy because the advancement is very incremental from one exercise to the next. But when you have notes or rudiments that are, let's say, six notes, whether they be double paradiddles, paradiddle diddles, six stroke rolls, some of those things just happen to live in a sextuplet space, but I think they become more interesting many times, or often enough, when you actually play them as straight 16th notes. And you're getting that six note rhythm in the context of straight 16ths, as opposed to playing them in sextuplets. So, for example, and pardon me if I sound like I'm rambling, but when we get to double paradiddles and whatnot, which I don't mean to dive ahead, I don't know how detailed you want to go.
Yeah, wait.
Anything,
Let me find a page.
yeah. Well, I'll continue here as you're finding it, but feel free to go to, for example, in the all things diddles section. Okay, go to double paradiddles, for example. Those chapters have a part one and a part two, and the part one, I believe, plays them as straight sixteenths, and then the part two plays the identical rudiment but in sextuplets, and they take on a life of their own, and they feel completely different, but they become very useful in terms of soloing and fills. Sorry, I see some questions
Yeah,
here.
let's. So I think we've done a good job of showing what's in the book. I just want to say, so I don't forget before we take these questions,
Hmm.
putting on my drum teacher hat for a second.
Uh-huh.
This is a very long, it's a very complete, very extensive book, and I found that I can leave it on the stand and just do, maybe one section, work on those Hertas for a while, and same thing with students. Like I've had some students get the book, and we just work on some of the paradiddle stuff, like
Hmm.
don't necessarily have to try to digest it all straight in one time. This is a really extensive book, so uh,
I'm really
that's
sorry
one.
about that, but the OCD kicked in, and I felt like I needed to get it all out there and make sure it was complete and somewhat conclusive.
Absolutely. All right, let's get to a few questions. So,
Okay.
hang on, let me go back here um, from our friend Ryan, um, my good buddy from Colorado, terrific player, drum teacher. He wanted to ask. I've seen many hard hitters live in concert, including Neil Peart, Stuart Copeland, Carl Palmer. Yet I've never seen anyone hit consistently as hard as you do during an entire 9/8 nail show. Do you have any advice or tips to keep up that consistency?
Oh, I, well, first of all, thank you. It, I think that when the realization, now this is something that came naturally, by the way. I never thought, okay, how do I hit harder and harder and harder? You have energy, you're excited to play live, the adrenaline's pumping, and you let it out on stage. But like with anything, relaxation is the key to everything. If you, for example, try to hit very hard and you are tense, you will hurt yourself. And that is not an exaggeration. So, and you know, the older you get, the more you have to stretch out and kind of keep that keep that in mind.
Give it 10 years, bro.
Yeah, but and you know, it's funny. We mentioned Jim Chapin earlier, and I was fortunate enough to meet him a few times, and he would always go on and on and on about the molar technique. Okay, over and over and over again at the pad. He's like, if you don't get this, you're gonna hurt yourself when you're older. So now I'm 36. I feel like it's not something I think about, but he definitely ingrained it in my head. And you realize it's as simple as this. If you grip a stick tightly and you whack a snare drum, that's not going to feel great. Okay. You're going to feel a tightness in the palm of your hand from gripping too tightly. You might feel a sting in your elbow, a vibration. You know, then take it one step at a time. Hit the exact same way, but loosen your hand. Okay. You'll realize, okay, I smacked the snare drum. My palm doesn't hurt as much, but I still felt the buzz in my elbow or whatever it may be. Then you concentrate on loosening that and it being more of a full arm approach, and you realize you get more volume, more power, and it didn't hurt at all. In fact, it felt quite good. So you just have to keep that in mind that relaxation really is the key.
Hmm. So, Aaron had I think you sort of addressed that. Aaron said, how do you maintain looseness? How tight are you gripping the sticks? And your answer is you're not really
Uh,
gripping them super
yeah,
tightly.
not gripping them super tightly. And there is something I never really thought about this until a Bonham thing that I heard not too long ago, surprisingly. I mean, I've been a fanatic since I was 8 years old, but I recently read something that he supposedly said where he used fairly large drumsticks and how he was able to do that. And he said that, according to this quote, I'm paraphrasing here, but that basically you let the weight of the stick do a lot of the work. And when you discover the feel of kind of harnessing that natural momentum of the stick being its own thing and you not just controlling it, you find ways to utilize that power. Somebody was asking me about double strokes at the bass drum. And when I was thinking about a way to really explain how to get strong double strokes, start slowly, but you realize that once you hit that first note on the bass drum and the beater comes back, you then have that momentum to catch on the second note. And when you find a way to kind of harness that balance and you're using the power of the beater itself, you then gain that feel as to how to do it repetitively.
Hmm, that's great. Question from Dylan Lloyd. I got to brag on Dylan. Dylan started studying with me when he was probably in 8th grade, maybe all through high school. Now he's out in the pro world playing. So proud of him. He wants to know do you have a daily practice routine, and how might it differ from what you do to get ready to go on tour?
This is going to be a very disappointing answer, so I'm going to apologize in advance. Okay. I do not have a daily practice routine. And the reason why that is that when I'm on tour, which is fairly frequently, I don't really have the ability to play other instruments as often as I'd like to. Conversely, when I'm on tour, I spend more time at the practice pad warming up before shows. When I'm at home, that's when I really get to utilize the time to play all the instruments that I love to play and write with. And the drums kind of become more of a compositional instrument where I really sit down to play when I need to record a new song that I've written. Of course, sessions and things like that do come up, and I always enjoy playing on things that I usually wouldn't, but I don't have a sort of set routine. Nor do I with the other instruments. I find myself gravitating towards writing and utilizing that time that I have at home to be as productive as I can.
Makes sense. Vincent Tehera. Vincent is asking, is there a section in the book that goes over strengthening one's non-dominant hand and fingers? Though my left has still gotten very much better and stronger than it was, it still has not caught up to my right in
Okay,
match grip.
this is an excellent question. And the answer is truly, I'm sure you would concur, Joe, the entire book deals with that. Now, fingers, I do talk about fingers in the text leading up to one of the chapters. It may be in the drags section or doubles, I'm not exactly sure. But fingers I see as an extension of wrist technique because, let's say right now I'm air drumming, just hitting eighth notes, and I'm doing it all with my wrist. It's all loose. But if I wanted to then start doing it with the fingers, if this is the softest version of doing that, in fact, I don't have anything here, but you can kind of start with the fingers, and as you get to a dynamic level where you can't play any harder, that's when the wrist becomes more of the dominant part of the arm that you're using. And then when you reach the ceiling of that dynamically, it becomes more of a full arm stroke. Again, apologies for the air drumming, but
Yeah.
hopefully that makes
Yeah,
sense.
you're moving the load to a
Hmm.
bigger engine, bigger muscle group.
Exactly.
Yeah. Um,
Exactly.
and and one thing I would say to Vincent, I think if you have concerns about that, right, you get with a teacher to look at your technique, but then there's a certain amount of reps. It's just reps. Like
Yeah.
you're gonna have to just work it up. Like that's the athletic part of what we do.
Yeah. And I always mention the importance of just being aware of what your hands feel like. Because when you're aware of being tight, which not a lot of people are, and that lack of awareness is part of the reason why people don't understand why their doubles aren't faster, and it's because their hands are tight. So once you're aware of how that feels, and it's easy to realize that in the context of this book because you're constantly having to go back and forth from your dominant side to your weak side. So you have an immediate feedback as to why does this feel different? And often enough, it is tightness.
Yeah. Robert Schaefer made a comment. It looks like it'll take years to get through the book. And I see Rob. I see you had a comment back to him. I just wanted to make a comment about that too, to Robert and all you guys. So for many years, I wanted to play the four-way coordination in beyond bop drumming.
Hmm.
And when I was in my early 30s, I was like, I couldn't do it. I just
Uh-huh.
couldn't do it. But I would leave it on the stand, and I would, do a little bit, and then, well, I happen to be a stubborn guy, so kept it on the stand. And so it's cool to do things in these pieces, revisit them, keep them up there, go over them. We have a lot of books at Hudson, and you shouldn't be discouraged from looking at these different things, taking a
Hmm.
piece and like, right? So if you want to work on, let's say you want to work on the Hertas that we described, right? You could just make that a project for a few months. Like, I'm just
Hmm.
going to work on that thing, right? You could, it's not
Correct.
like you need to
And
go.
and there's something I think in summary at the end, I say something about the point of this book is to show how creativity works, how you can expand upon simple ideas. But really, it's about application. It's not about just playing what's on the printed page. If you take a phrase that isn't even a bar long and you actually find a way to apply it to your own playing, I've done my job. So I don't think it should be taken as you don't need to be a completionist to get the point of the book. Take what you want from it. That's the most important thing. Nobody's ever going to quiz you on, hey, did you play exercise 33? And who cares? But that being said, there's a lot in there while not being overly repetitive. And what I mean by that is one of the things I was very aware of in writing the book is that I didn't want it to be a book that had every possible variation and permutation and sticks displacement. And that stuff is great. And those classics will be revered for lifetimes. I didn't want this book to be that. So even though it is lengthy, even all the stuff that you've seen, 10 exercise here, 10 there, 20 here, and the show's moving. I didn't want it to feel like, okay, I get it, but I still have 9 exercises to do here. It moves, and before you get tired of it, the next section starts. At least that
Uh,
was my intent.
no, it's true. You nailed it because, I mean, I get proposals every day that are a
Hmm.
million variations. So yeah, there's no all the materials were very well thought out.
Thank you.
You did amazing with that. So I think real quick we'll take three more questions up to Oscar's question. We'll probably go a little past the hour. Is that okay, Alon? Just a tiny bit.
Sure, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Is
Um,
this Oscar Podolsky, the finest drummer in all of Poland?
yeah, we'll get to Oscar in a minute. He's been right with us the whole time. Um,
He is a delightful guy and a fantastic drummer, and he's a teacher as well. He puts out great content.
oh, great.
Yeah,
Um, I just want to mention Ryan Claxton had a nice comment. Ryan is one of our authors on digital. He has a great book about thrash metal drumming. Yep,
great.
teacher and player. And then another Ryan, Ryan Coomer. Did double bass drumming come naturally to you, or did you have to practice it?
Well, look, I would never consider myself a double bass player, and what I will say is that that journey began, or so to speak, early on. I think one of my brother's high school friends had a double pedal, and at the time I was still 9, 10 years old or whatever, and he brought it to a practice, and I had fun playing with it, and it was easy to get into because, and I remember I saw something Ginger Baker saying this at the footage from the original Cream Farewell, where my dad ingrained into me to keep time on the hi-hat. Okay, when I moved over to the ride cymbal. So I guess the first place my mind went to is okay, I can keep time on the left bass drum pedal and then fill it in with different notes on the right foot, and you start getting these interesting rhythms that you don't really have to think too much about is if you're used to keeping time on the hi-hat. So my dad eventually got me a double pedal and I did use it, but I always put a lot of pride into the strength of my right foot, and I was obviously, as I've already mentioned, a Bonham fanatic, and anybody who loves Bonham knows the magic of the right foot and doubles and triplets and whatnot. So I never wanted to be dependent on a double pedal. I never listened to double pedal intensive music. So I did ditch it eventually. However, there are certain bands that I've played with that require a double pedal from time to time. So I have one with Nine Inch Nails. I have one with Danny Elfman, and those are part of the parts. So I need the right tools to do the job. But at home or in the studio, I just have a single pedal on the drum set. But I will say, the only disadvantage that I have been able to come up with in terms of left leading is that when I play with a double pedal, I feel inclined to lead with my left foot, which would be my weaker foot. So that is a strange thing, and it's the only drawback I've been able to come up with in almost 30 years of playing.
Nice. Um, Carson Greenwald. Hey, Carson. Good to see you here. Ilan, what made you choose copper drums, and does the band notice you aren't playing wooden drums?
No, so what this person is referring to are the drums I used for Q Drum Co. And there's a whole story as to how I became a part of that company and that whole thing. But basically, Q Drum Co.'s unique product was metal drums. But what made them unique as opposed to, say, stainless steel Ludwigs, which were awesome, by the way, is that the Q Drum Co. stuff were wood shells riveted at the seams, but they had maple re-rings on the top. Okay, so the heads would sit on those maple re-rings on a perfectly cut bearing edge, but the tone would resonate through copper or brass, steel, whatever it was. And they were very unique. They sounded very warm, so no, nobody ever turned around and said, those drums sound metallic. They're very warm drums. I have since become a Gretsch guy, and that's a whole story in and of itself. But those drums are maple, so there you have it. But all the Q stuff in the variety of materials was excellent, and because that's what set the company apart, and is me kind of being somewhat a face of the company, I felt like I needed to display the unique product, and they were great drums.
And we'll wrap up questions with Oscar, and he wants to know, how do you get better as a songwriter?
Ooh, how do you get better as a songwriter? Well, we're going to need another 2 hours for that.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. Just like anything, it's a muscle that needs to be exercised, and always having an instrument around really helps. I mean, I find myself playing so much more guitar, for example, when I have one on the couch. I just gravitate towards it. I pick it up, and as I'm noodling around or whatever, ideas present themselves. And as it goes, the more you write, the better you get at it, and especially early on, the quicker you get sort of bad ideas or not so great ideas out, and you make room for the better ones. The challenge becomes when you write music, at least I have found, you are proud to write things that you like. And in a way, it's almost easier at the beginning. Once you kind of wrap your head around structure and chords and melodies and harmonies, it's easy to go, wow, I wrote a song and I like it. But if you focus on not repeating yourself, you then have to dig deeper and deeper and stretch yourself out to come up with ideas that you still find interesting. Because I find that that's the difference between recording a riff on your audio notes as opposed to writing a song. If you have that seedling of a melody or something that keeps you interested, that interest will pull you through to actually complete the thing. So you just got to keep doing it. And like with anything else, if you learn other people's music that you like, you think, how did he get, or how did they get from this verse to that pre-chorus and out into the chorus? Or why is that bridge so satisfying? You just learn it, you'll quickly realize they're the same chords you already know, but they're approached in a different way. And it's mesmerizing stuff. I recommend the Beatles book to everybody.
Nice.
It's all there, at least most of it.
Cool. I think your compositional prowess comes through in the drum book. I mean, everything's musical.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I
Um,
appreciate that.
so before we sign off, I want to thank all you guys for watching. I love seeing your faces. I've done a lot of these sessions, and a lot of you have been there for Sabian, for the Education Network. So Ryan Sapp, always good to see you. Nick Marcy, one of our authors, is Hudson. He has a book, The Pulse of Jazz. Vincent, thank you for your question. Ray Levere, it's an honor to have you here. Ilya Stemkovsky wrote for Modern Drummer for many years. Great to have you here. John Gill, my old buddy, constant presence at Sabian for the Education Network. All you guys. Oscar, nice to meet you. Marcelo, nice to see you. Rick D. Dylan. Dylan was looking forward to this. I'm glad he was here. Anyway, thanks to all of you for being here. If you think that this was productive in helping to have a great author on like this to discuss his work, that can help you know how to use the book, we'd love to do some more of these. And Ilan, having you as an author and having this book is really an honor for us. Thank you for giving us some time today. to talk
It
about it.
was a pleasure. Thank you very much. It's an honor for you guys to have taken on the project and actually published it. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
We really, really honored. And of course, we have to acknowledge and thank the mastermind of Hudson Music, who's lurking behind the curtain, Mr. Rob Wallace. He
Rob Wallace.
he's here today. He wants to stay quiet, but Rob's you know the innovator of drum education, and it's great to have
You
Hudson
are
Music to be able to put this stuff
both
out.
delightful and a pleasure to work with. And yes, I would like to thank everybody who joined. I hope you found it remotely interesting. So thank you.
Ilan, your pleasure, man, and I look forward to a lot more people checking out the book. And keep in touch with Hudson, and when you have your next crazy idea, let us know.
Will do. All right. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks everybody.
Everybody, have a lovely day wherever you are.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Peace.